Oil and gas companies are being taken to court for lying about their connection to climate change. It's a big win in the Hawaii Supreme Court as they reject Big Oil's appeal to not go to trial. We're going to talk about why this is important, where it's happening elsewhere on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I am your host, Andrew Lewin. This is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And action is what we're talking about today, as well as what's going on in the ocean. The Hawaii Supreme Court has rejected big oil companies, the appeal to not go to court. And a quote at the beginning of this article in commondreams.org is said to say, "This is a good day for advancing our efforts to help Honolulu survive the costs and consequences of climate change." Now, we know that Hawaii, especially Maui, was hit big time by wildfires and climate change consequence in this past summer. It was devastating. 97 people died. Numerous people lost their homes. Lahaina, which is one of the big cities in the area on the island, was devastated. It was just destroyed. We saw videos of people hanging out in the harbor to avoid the fires and be in the water. We saw smoke inhalation, everywhere. We saw forests that they had gone, all because of dry weather. Due to climate change, big winds due to climate change from intense hurricanes. This has been known for a while. We've known that climate change consequences have been hitting us hard. We know it costs money to go back and fix or restore cities like Lahaina, right? Cities in Florida, cities all over the U.S., all over Canada, all over the world. We've seen this happen. And we know for a fact that big oil companies have been lying about climate change for a long time, for decades, more than multiple decades. And we've known that this has happened, and nothing has really been done about it until now. Now, in the Hawaii Supreme Court, there was a case that was filed in 2020 before the Maui fires. A lawsuit that accused ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell, Sunoco, and other major oil and gas companies of introducing and promoting fossil fuel products that they knew were a threat to the world's climate. The oil giants engaged in what is a quote, public deception campaigns designed to obscure the connection between their products and global warming and the environmental, physical, social, and economic consequences flowing from it. This is what the lawsuit alleges. So it says, in his majority opinion, Chief Justice Mark Rechtelwad, I think that's how you pronounce it, wrote that Big Oil's attempt to toss the lawsuit on the grounds that it is, quote, another in a long line of lawsuits seeking to regulate interstate and international greenhouse gas emissions. That fell short because the suit, quote, does not seek to regulate emissions and does not seek damages for interstate emissions. Rather, the plaintiff's complaint clearly seeks to challenge the promotion of sale of fossil fuel products without warning and abetted by a sophisticated disinformation campaign. This is what close quotes. This is what the Supreme Justice said. This quote, this case concerns torts committed in Hawaii that cause alleged injuries in Hawaii. Thus, defendants' arguments on appeal fail. So Matthew Gonser, who's the executive director of Honolulu's Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency, applauded the court's decision in a statement and pledged to, quote, continue pursuing this case in a trial court where we filed it 3.5 years ago and where discovery can now begin in earnest. He said, this is a good day for advancing our efforts to help Honolulu survive the costs and consequences of climate change. I should mention that Maui County is also suing Big Oil, along with Honolulu and dozens of other cities and counties and states across the U.S. So, look, we've seen PR companies and marketing companies be shunned because of their support for oil and gas companies. We've seen B Corp shunned because of the same thing. we have seen people starting to link whoever is associated with investing in oil and gas, such as banks and so forth, across the U.S. as well as Canada and other places, be called out for their support of climate, their support of these fossil fuel industries that are polluting the environment. Yet they say that they want to do stuff about climate change, but they're making money off the backs of a fossil fuel industry that is just promoting and continuing to support climate change, essentially, just through their work. So this is a big win in terms of making sure that this can go to court. Whichever courts, depending along the U.S., Supreme Court decides that, they'll have to pay damages. This will be pretty big damages, because if you think about it, it's not just the Maui fires in Lahaina. It's, whatever happened in Honolulu, any damages that can be linked to climate change in Honolulu, coral reef bleaching. There could be sea surges and storm surges and so forth. There could be a lot of things that can happen to these oil and gas companies who have made trillions of money over the last multiple decades because of their business and because of the hold that they have over us citizens, that we are paying for the damages. The taxpayers pay for the damage. Wherever you live, you are paying for the damages caused by climate change consequences. That's essentially what we've had as a consequence. And we're looking at millions to billions and even trillions over the years of actually paying in damages due to climate change consequences. So it's about time that somebody is holding, oil and gas companies and fossil fuel industry accountable. It shouldn't just be up to us to pay for the damages. It should be up to the fossil fuel industry, right? That's what it should be up to, not up to us. They are making, and I'll just say, their quarterly reports on Tuesday, BP announced a $3.29 billion in the third quarter of profits, up from 2.6 in the second quarter. So it had dipped a little bit by about, a billion or so. And it says here, as the United States comes off a summer of dangerous, record-breaking extreme heat, Americans are paying the price for climate change disasters, while big oil CEOs are lining their pockets. This is Cassidy DePola, who's a campaign manager for fossil free media. She said in a statement, quote, "Big oil's rapidly growing profits and fossil fuel expansion jeopardizes a livable future for all and the health of our democracy." Now, this is a big step forward in making the fossil fuel industry pay for the damage that they cause. A lot of the media that was put out to say, climate change isn't real, global warming isn't real, it's all a hoax, it's a left-wing type idea that still gets perpetuated today, and they continue to sort of muddy the waters around climate change for the public. And every time I put up a post on TikTok or on Instagram that has anything to do with climate change, there is somebody in my comments saying it's a hoax, it's not real. Look at this YouTube video by this person. Even though that 97% of the science community agrees that climate change is caused by human effects. These are the things that continue to make things difficult, that have made things difficult and continue to make things difficult. In fact, allegedly, there is a document that went around Canada that showed that the PR company that was working with many of the fossil fuel companies were saying that we are just going to go ahead and we are going to say, you know what? Climate change is here and it's so far gone that there's really nothing you can do about it. So for decades before, we've said it wasn't real, but now that we know that it's real, there's really nothing we can do about it. So don't worry about it and just continue to invest in fossil fuels. Like, this is an industry that's getting desperate and just being like, yeah, we went too far, we get it, but you should still buy our products. And look, they blame us. They blame the individuals. It's our individual choice to pay for gas. It's our individual choice to pay for natural gas or oil heating our homes. That's not true. It's not just us. We are stuck within, this system that is fossil fuel based, especially here in Canada. Our major national exports are oil. No matter where we get it from, and no matter what it does to our environment, we don't care. Here in Canada, the government, whether they're saying that we need to change from climate change or not, we know that oil and gas right now is still one of our biggest natural resources and the biggest part of our economy. If the oil goes down in price, our economy goes down as well. And we've been relying on it way too long. And I'm just so glad that we're seeing court cases happen where these companies are going to trial and they're going to be held accountable for what they've done. They've prevented action against climate change for multiple decades because they knew it would affect their bottom line. They bought over politicians. They continue to buy politicians in every country, some worse than others. And they continue to manipulate the narrative around fossil fuels and how bad it is for the environment. They will change it to make it say, you know what, we're actually not that bad. Or now we're like, it's so bad that don't worry about it. We can't come back from it, but we'll still make money. And whatever damage happens, we have to pick up the tab as taxpayers. It's just amazing how they've been able to get away from it this long. It just goes to show the power of supporting candidates, quote unquote. Oil and gas companies supporting candidates. You see it. It's not hard to see anymore. It used to be harder, but now it's not hard to see when we hear from politicians all the time and we see where they're voting, how they're voting. Texas, just a while ago, they made their legislation easy for businesses to work in, especially oil and gas businesses, because Texas is an oil state. And so the solar panel industry looks over at Texas from California and says, oh, it's really easy to work as a business and not have to worry about regulations as much in Texas. Okay, we're going to take our industry there because it should be easy to start up. And then a bunch of politicians came out and said, why are they coming in here and starting, to put in solar panels and everything? It's bad for the environment. It's this, it's that. It shouldn't happen. They're taking advantage of our laws. Well, that's what the oil and gas companies have done for decades, right? And all of a sudden, when a competitor in energy comes in and says, hey, it's actually easy to work here in Texas. We're going to work here as a business with very little regulations. And although I don't agree with little environmental regulations, I still feel like there should be. It was basically the same for both the oil and gas industry, a fossil fuel industry, as it would have been for the solar panel industry. And then all of a sudden the politicians are like, no, we got to make sure there's regulations about solar panels. Why all of a sudden the regulations about soil panels? Right? It just makes you're like, this is too obvious. This is way too obvious. Conservatives are about shrinking government, and make it better for privatization of services and make it better for companies to work in. Freedom. That's what it's about. But when another industry wants to come in and say, hey, I want to take advantage of that same freedom, oh, no, you can't do that. We need to regulate this industry. And although I do believe that regulation is good, it's just the hypocrisy is just staring us right in the face. They're not even trying anymore. So to have these trials, such as the one in Hawaii, where they're asking for damages to pay back to the people who have been wronged by climate change. Right? It's not up to individuals. It's up to companies. It's up to governments. It's up to the courts to say, yeah, we know who's responsible, and we're going to make sure that they pay for it. So hopefully this trial, I'll try and continue to follow it. Hopefully this trial goes in the favor of the environment, and these oil and gas companies, these big oil companies are going to have to pay. Because anybody who's worked in Hawaii as a fossil fuel worker or as a fossil fuel company know what they've done to that poor area, those poor islands, and the inhabitants of those islands. Not just from an environmental damage component, but also from a social and economic component. Right? So that's where we're at. We're at this point in time where big oil is getting sued, just like Big Sugar and all these other companies that are damaging the environment. And now we're seeing it after this year. We're seeing it too. So we'll probably see more lawsuits coming down. This was a lawsuit that was filed in 2020. We know there was a lawsuit by kids in Montana, in the state of Montana, that won a big climate battle. So hopefully we'll start to see the results from these soon, and I'll be able to let you know the good news. Hopefully. But they're gonna have to start thinking about how much money they're gonna have to put into our system, back into our system, because they've made the money on our backs. And that's not right. So that's it for today's episode. If you have any comments, questions about this episode, please feel free to let me know through DMing me on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. And I would like to ask you a favor. I would really like to ask you a favor. This is a big favor. If you can take a couple of minutes out of your day and review this podcast, not just this episode, but this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or if you're allowed to put a review on your app, please put a review. It just kind of gives me feedback on how the episodes are going, telling me why you like it, but also it helps other people know why you enjoy listening to the podcast. And so when people are looking up, ocean podcast or some type of conservation podcast to listen to, they can do so by looking at the recommendations and the ratings and reviews and say, oh, actually, we really like this because so-and-so said, they get all their information from here. So I'd love, if you're an avid listener or if this is your first time and you really like what you're listening to, please feel free to review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any other app that you're listening on that allows you to put in ratings and reviews. And if you want to take a screenshot and let me know, I would love to hear about that. I would love to see that. That would be great. You can hit me up on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. That's it for today's episode. I want to thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.